This week, the Liberal government unveiled new gun control legislation, and we wanted to get reaction on this story. So we have reached out to Canadian Doctors for Protection from Guns. We've reached their co-chair, Dr. Najma Ahmed, who is also a trauma surgeon at St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto. She sees firsthand what gun violence can do. Dr. Ahmed, thank you so much for making time for us this evening.
It's great to be here with you, Natasha.
Dr. Ahmed, before we get into your reaction to what the government has brought in terms of legislation, let's talk about what you do see as a surgeon in the hospital as it relates to gun violence in this country, just so people can get a sense of how serious it is and what this gun violence can do to an individual.
Yes, it's very sad, actually, and it's terribly tragic. Weekly, we see bodies shattered and lives shattered, families and communities shattered in a way that is very violent and horrific. We see the unnecessary loss of life from suicide, from domestic violence, from interpersonal violence, and very often this is very, very unexpected and a terrible toll for families and communities. And what I think a lot of people may not understand is that these are weapons of war. They're intended to maim and kill people, and very often they are successful. People do die, and even if people survive, we do our best to give them back their life, but they spend weeks and weeks in the hospital, multiple operations, weeks in the ICU attached to a ventilator, and then weeks in the hospital after that, and then rehabilitation, and frankly, their lives are never the same.
So let's talk about this legislation that's been brought in, Bill C-21. What is your understanding? Because there is quite a bit of criticism coming towards it from both those who would advocate for gun control and those who have guns and feel they're being penalized. What's your understanding of what it will do?
Yeah, it's, Bill C-21, we see this as a step forward in the ongoing dialogue that Canadians are having and with themselves and with the government to define what the role of guns will be in our communities, in our society, what level of tolerance that we all as Canadians will accept with respect to what kinds of guns we want in our communities and homes. We see this as a step forward, building on the foundation of Bill C-71 and the Orders of Council of May 2020. There are some important steps forward, which we would like to recognize. This proposed legislation will decrease straw purchases, act on advertising, limit magazine capacity, address the smuggling of guns across the Canada-U.S. border, make it legal for guns to be removed from those who spread hate online or in other fora. So there are a number of things that we think are positive. There is some room for improvement, and we are in a minority government. Therefore, we hope that other political parties will work with this government to strengthen this legislation further.
Dr. Ahmed, people who are on your side of the argument, who want to see tougher legislation, say that this bill is a betrayal. In fact, one of the most vocal advocates for this is a woman named Suzanne LaPlante Edward. Now, you might be familiar with her name, our audience might be familiar with her name, because she is very vocal on these issues because her daughter was killed in the 1989 gun attack at École Polytechnique, one of 14 women who was killed on that horrible day in this country. And in a statement that she released as a result of Bill C-21, she said that this is a betrayal. And she said of the Liberal government, they lied to us, they lied to Canadians. So clearly for her and for many others, this proposed legislation just completely lacks teeth. It doesn't make people any safer. And we've heard from other experts saying it just sort of pushes forward the laws that already exist. There's no meaningful change here. What's your reaction to that?
I would say there are some meaningful changes, and I can understand people who feel this legislation does not go far enough. We ourselves would like to see much stronger legislation that would decrease the proliferation and the presence of these terrible and very powerful semi-automatic rifles. We also advocated for that, and we would like to see a national strategy on semi-automatic handguns. We would like to see a strategy that would decrease their presence in our homes and communities for sure. Certainly, we will continue to work with the government to bring these things to bear, because it's very clear the majority of Canadians want this. The majority of Canadians want stronger gun legislation that will make our homes and communities safer, that will remove the semi-automatic rifles that were prohibited in the Orders of Council of May 2020. That is our desire and wish as well. And a national strategy rather than a patchwork would be more desirable from the perspective of many Canadians.
And Dr. Ahmed, there's also the other side of the argument, folks who don't necessarily advocate widespread gun ownership, but do own guns themselves, and they say, well, all this legislation is going to do is penalize people who are law-abiding, who are not part of the problem. It's illegal guns that are the vast majority of problems. And then there's also the issue of gun advocates who say that a replica gun ban will hurt businesses like paintball and airsoft facilities. So it would hurt people financially, it hurts people on a philosophical level. What's your argument to them?
Well, we do know, the world literature shows very clearly that the more guns there are in society, the more gun violence there is. And these legal guns, legally owned guns, can be stolen and sold into illegal markets and then used in crime guns. We also know that about a third to a half of guns that are used in crime were originally legally purchased and then somehow made their way into these crime scenes. So it's not entirely genuine to say that it's all about illegal guns. We know the more guns there are in our homes and communities, the more at-risk people are. We know the majority of suicides are committed with legal guns. We know the majority of domestic homicides are committed with legal guns as well. And these are societal issues that we have to address.
Okay. Dr. Najma Ahmed, I want to thank you again so much for your time this evening.
It's been my pleasure.
Dr. Ahmed, good evening. Dr. Ahmed is the co-chair of Canadian Doctors for Protection from Guns. She's also a trauma surgeon at St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto.